Welcome everyone. Today I have a new video for Path of Exile 2. Now in this video, we'll be looking into a very important announcement, or I guess warning to everyone that is planning to play Path of Exile 2 and is planning to change different Ascendancy classes. So the first part of the video, let's have a look at this very important news throughout some of the developers' interviews about the potentiality and likelihood that you cannot change Ascendancy classes. And this means once you select the 12 Ascendancy, you'll have to go through the same class again to pick a different Ascendancy class within the class, which is quite important. And this is actually very different to Path of Exile 1, which you can change Ascendancy within the class. So let's have a look at this at the start of the video. And on the second part, I am working towards my Ascendancy selectors, try to break down Ascendancy and also classes throughout different features and also categories. And let's have a look at this work in progress on the second part. So coming over to this particular Reddit post, and some of my friends for Path of Exile has told me that we cannot change Ascendancies in Path of Exile 2 at this moment. Now, for those of you that has played Path of Exile 1, you probably know that you can change Ascendancy classes in Path of Exile 1, which was actually really good because there are 3 Ascendancy classes for each of the class. And this means if you play the sources, you can interchange between the Stormwaver or the Chronomancer in Path of Exile 2. And this was to be expected by most of the veteran players. But this seems to be not the case. So let's have a look at this short clip between Talkative Troy and also Jonathan over here as the developer's interview.
So I'm glad to hear it made it into the game. And then the other Ascendancy question, can you change Ascendancies in POE 2?
So you actually can't right now. I think I did another interview recently where I thought that we could, but I believe that you can't at the moment. There's probably more discussion to have about that. I do know that certainly some designers are very keen to be that a locked choice. So we'll talk about that more. We'll see how that goes. But at the moment you can't, and so that'll be how it goes into early access anyway.
So that is quite important. So from Jonathan and also from the early access for Path of Exile 2, it is likely, guys, we cannot change Ascendancy classes within the same class. And this is different to Path of Exile 1. Now, if you have a look at down in the Reddit replies and also the posts, a lot of veteran players are not too happy because they were enjoying the fact we can change the Ascendancy, and this means you can save a lot of time as you try different class Ascendancies within the class, even though currently there's only 2 Ascendancy class compared to the 3 that is to be expected at the launch of the game. A lot of the players are saying that, because the developers of Path of Exile 2 tend to hear feedbacks from the community, it is potentially that this can be changed in the future, but we shouldn't bank on this as well. So you can see some of those comments and also the replies. So people are looking forward to more ways of time saving or maybe quality of life features, and by changing the Ascendancy class within the class seems to be a big factor in Path of Exile 1. So why would the developers not consider this feature? This is just from my personal perspective, right? So at the launch of the game, there isn't all the content, there isn't all the availability in early access. And during this time, maybe the developers do want us to try out this new way of playing the game without being able to swap between the class ascension. This will take the players a little longer to clear the game as well if you want to try all the Ascendancies. So instead of playing 6 classes, you're pretty much playing 12 different class ascensions. And this means longer play time, probably longer time to get used to them, and maybe more testings, and maybe just overall a longer enjoyment of Path of Exile 2 in general. But once the game comes closer to launch, with 3 Ascendancy class each with 12 classes, and this means you look at 36 replayability, and that's maybe too much. So for me personally, it is likely around the early access, we cannot change Ascendancy. I can accept this because there's only 12 class Ascendancy to play, right? But at the launch of the official launch of the game in 2025, I'm hoping that the developers allows us to change Ascendancy classes within the class, just like Path of Exile 1. So let me know what you guys think about this particular part. And this is of course a big warning to players who are planning to play the same class but then farm with one of the class specialization or ascension and then change into a different class. So I was having this discussion with one of my friends who was planning to play Mercenary, and we all agreed that Gemini Legionnaire is going to be very powerful, very broken in the endgame with the best gears, with higher gem quality, with availability of all the best gems. So what we were discussing is to play the Witch Hunter at the start of the league launch with the ability to explode enemies, to farm up all the gears and also all the items. And then once we get to the endgame, I'm going to change Ascendancy class and then jump directly with a super farm higher level mercenary base class to play the Gemini Legionnaire. But with this latest news or development of the Ascendancy class being locked in, we should be careful of this. So at the same time, I cannot play a Infernalist and then expect to change into a Blood Mage in the late game, which is a little sad for me because that was actually my initial plan. I was going to try the Infernalist and then perk into the Blood Mage to enjoy the higher critical damage. So now during early access, it's likely we have to play each of the Ascendancy classes by themselves. And let me know what you guys think about this as well. Now coming over to the second part of the video, when I discovered this news and the latest development, I was actually trying to break the ascensions and also classes down using different categories, which will help me to understand those categories of classes. And here I have tried to categorize them down into speedy league starters, summoners, boss layers, maybe unkillable builds, and also spellcasters, and also higher potential endgame ascendancy classes. So let's briefly have a look, and again guys, the link of this particular Excel will be constantly updated with the latest information and also my perspective and also understanding of the game. And because the game is not released yet, this will be a work in progress, so just bear with me. So personally, I think the Stormwaver and also Chronomancer is great for a lot of things. They can be a league starter and they can potentially be a boss layer because the ability of the Chronomancer to protect yourself, to revert back in time and also to lower your cooldowns can be defensive and also offensive. And of course, those are two of the best spellcasting classes. On the other hand, for the Warbringer and also Titan, it is a questionable starting with those classes because it might not be the fastest league starter, and it is a potential for the Warbringer to become a summon as well with tokens and also spirits, maybe combining with additional summons in the game. And in terms of the boss lane, I do think the one-shotting Titan may be very good for bosses because again, bosses tend to be staying in a circle, and even though you have slow animation casting with your spells, you're hitting very hard. And of course, the warrior class tend to be the tankier armor-based class that can be unkillable in the late game, which is a particular type of build I really do enjoy in Path of Exile 1, because if you become unkillable, you can fix most of the content, or you can just, cruise your way through the content with higher damage for having, super high armor and also sustain. Now in terms of the Dead Air and also Pathfinder, those are two definitely some of the classes that can be a great league starter. At the same time, I want to mention that the Invoker, the Acolyte over here, and also the Witch Hunter can be a potential league starter. The ability to explode undead with enemies is going to be a great feature to farm horde of enemies. And I do forget to mention that the Warbringer also can be a league starter because his ability to explode corpses, and which can be interesting. So let's go through this particular category. I think it's actually easier to, instead of going with classes and also ascensions, let's go through the category horizontally this way. So what classes can be a summoner for me? I mentioned Warbringer, and of course we can go with the Blood Mage, the Infernalist, they can be a summoner for me. And finally, both of the Witch Hunter and also Gemini Legionnaire can be a summoner. So we have potentially 5 summoner ascendancy classes, with the Ballistas, with the Minions, Skeletons, Revive Dead, and also with the Totems and also additional spirits. Now in terms of the boss layer, we're mentioning about the flexibility of the Chronomancer, the hard-hitting Titan, and there is also the possibility of additional boss layer, and the best one of course will be the Witch Hunter. The Witch Hunter can deal a massive 30% initial life of the boss with one hit, and the ability to reduce the spell casting frequency of enemies makes the Witch Hunter very, very good for bosses. Now, I'm not saying that other classes are not great for bosses, but we're highlighting potentially the best particular class ascendancy for those type of content. And in terms of the unkillable classes, other than the warriors, what I'm thinking is the mercenary over here maybe the German Legionnaire can become unkillable if you have the best gears. And also the Acolyte of Chiyala is definitely something with a lot of sustain, with a lot of mana and also energy shield leech, together with bonus life, mana, damage, and also chaos resistance to become unkillable in the late game. Now, one Ascendancy class that may be surprisingly tanky is going to be the Blood Mage. The Blood Mage is going to have a lot of life, and you will be purposely stacking life, which is going to be a defensive stat, for offensive stats for critical damage. So the Blood Mage can be a very powerful tank and also DPS at the same time. But the difficulty of this class, let's talk about this in the end game. Now, we have mentioned about spellcasters with sources, with the Stonewaver and also Chronomancer. And if we come forward a little bit, for me, the spellcasters can also be the melee battle mage with a monk, with an invoker, and also the acolyte. Those two can definitely be the spellcaster, together with a blood mage that also uses the life to cast in spells with higher damage. And finally, well, we can't rule out the German Legionnaire. This one, it has a lot of potentials in the end game, but it would definitely be a little weaker in the early game. And finally, coming over to some of the classes I think will be the strongest for the end game. Now, for me, two of the classes that really stand out is going to be the Blood Mage stacking a lot of life, and also the German Legionnaire stacking a lot of good gems and also abilities, and also the best gears in the game. I'm not saying the other classes won't be as great in the endgame, but those two seems to have a direct path of stacking certain stats and also items to become super strong, super tanky, and also having tons of health and also damage. So as a brief summary of this latest update, what I recommend if we want a speedy league starter, I still recommend going with the Deadeye and also going with a Stonewaver and potentially going with one of the monks over here. But if you want something that can clear out a lot of monsters, or maybe even become a great boss slayer, the Mercenary is definitely up there, together with the ability to sustain yourself or tank up with a Warrior. Finally, if you want to play the Summoners, the Witch is gonna be the one I want to play. And even though I left this one to a little later, I do want to play the Witch simply because I am a little leaning towards a Blood Witch. I am a little leaning towards a Blood Mage simply because the ability to stack life, but I also know this difficulty of playing the Blood Mage without knowing the build and also without knowing the best items can be a little difficult. This is why when I heard the news that you cannot change Ascendancy class, I was a little sad, because I was hoping to play the easier one, and then when I get the better understanding of the class, I go play the harder one. But now it looks like I have to play both of them, right? Which means more time to enjoy the game. So let me know what you guys think about the latest news update, and what do you think about this category of ranking for those classes and also Ascendancy classes. Now before we finish, if you guys haven't subscribed, this is a really good time to do so, because I'll be looking into the latest Path of Exile 2 news on different communities and also on our official forum, official webpage. I'll also be looking into the best build for each of the class as the meta develops with the Chinese and also the English community. So stay tuned for the latest update and also guides for Path of Exile 2. And of course, this is going to be a big month for us. And I'll try to bring you guys all of the latest content and also guides for Path of Exile 2 to come.